Okay, good evening, everyone, and we are back in the weekly Parsha, zooming into the Parsha. And this is the quintessential Parsha of the entire Torah because this is the week, PARSHAS YISRO, that KLAL YISROEL stands by Har Sinai, and we receive the greatest gift that Hashem has ever given to the world, and that is the Torah itself. And this solidifies us as the Am HaNivchar, the chosen nation. It solidifies all of the mitzvahs that the forefathers had been keeping for centuries already, just because of their own intuition into the world of spirituality. However, once that the Torah is given over in Har Sinai, it changes the game for the Jewish people forever and ever and ever. We have our book of our beliefs. We have our book of our direction, our hashkafa, the way that we look at the world. We have our book that is the divine word that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has shared with the neshamas of each and every single one of us to learn, to imbibe, to embrace, to live. And therefore, PARSHAS YISRO will go down, it goes down in history as being that essential parsha in the Torah that itself teaches us what Torah really is all about. So I want to learn with you tonight a famous piece from the Parsha based on the words of the Maharal and some others that should give us the perspective on what exactly it means, what KLAL YISRO was doing by Har Sinai when they came to receive the Torah, and how the receiving of something that took place 3,500 years ago, how that receiving of the Torah is something that we continue to live with until this day. And it is as relevant and as real and as powerful and as potent as it was when the Jewish people were standing by Har Sinai thousands of years ago. As Rashi writes in this week's Parsha, he says that the Torah should be kechadashim, it should be like it's brand new. Every single day that a person sits down to learn, every time they open up a page of Gemara, they open up a page of the Chumash, they open up a sefer, a book that is written and filled with Torah words, it should be kechadashim be'einecha. It should be like it's brand new, it's fresh, it's exciting in your eyes. The way that it was, when is given over to KLAL YISROEL by Har Sinai at Mount Sinai. And the Nefesh HaChaim writes that every single time that a person is sitting and they are learning, they should view themselves as if literally they are sitting by the foot of Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, and they are receiving this gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to us 3,500 years ago. It's the same Torah, it's the same freshness, the newness, the excitement, the enthusiasm. It's the word of the living God. And the Torah is called Torah's Chaim, the Torah of life. So you have the Torah, which is the Torah of life, and it is the Torah of the Elokim Chaim, the living God, which means it's alive. Torah is alive in our lives. And we try our best every single day to be chadashim, to make it new and exciting and stimulating, inspiring for ourselves. That way a person, they embrace it and they live it and they love it and they yearn for it constantly. So the Torah tells us the following is in the prelude to standing in Har Sinai and receiving the Torah. It says, Vayotze Moshe Sa'am, Moshe Benu brought the nation out, Likras Elokim min HaMachane, they came from the camps and they came to greet Elokim, to greet God. V'yisyatzvu v'sachti sahar, and they were standing by the foot of the mountain. Hashem has already given the Jewish people and Moshe Rabbeinu the great news that they're going to receive the Torah, and they have to prepare themselves and get ready. So what do they do? So it says the pasuk over here, they come out to greet the Ribono Shel Olam, and they are standing betachti sahar, they are standing at the foot of the mountain. Says Rashi on these words, what does it mean that they were standing? There they are, they're standing by the foot of Mount Sinai. They're already with great anticipation, trepidation, excitement, and they're anxious, they're nervous, but they know they're about to get themselves into the greatest moment in history. So the Pshuto V'Raglei Ahar, simple explanation of the words of this verse are They were standing by the foot of the mountain. But Rashi says, I'm bothered by this translation, because the word tachtis, tachtit, doesn't mean the foot of the mountain. Tachtis is tachas, means underneath. They were seemingly underneath the mountain. Well, how can you be standing at the foot of the mountain and simultaneously you're standing underneath the mountain? And how do you get underneath the mountain if the mountain is enrooted in the ground? So Rashi quotes the Midrash. It's the Midrash, it's the Gemara, and it says, Shenidla shahar mim kaimai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifted the mountain from its place, v'nichba aleim kegigis, and he hung the mountain over their heads like a barrel. And the Gemara continues over there, and the Gemara says the following words. It says, if you will accept the Torah upon yourselves, and you decide that you want to keep it, you want to live it, you want to make your whole life revolving around the mitzvahs that are there, so then mutav, it's going to be very good. I'll load up your life with blessings, with goodness. You'll have goodness in this world and fortune in the world to come. However, the Gemara says over there that if the Jewish people, if you will say, no, we don't want the Torah, then shama tekfuraschem, then over there is going to be your burial. I'm going to drop the mountain on your head, and that will be the end of the Jewish people. Pretty frightening moment in their lives. You know that you came to the mountain to receive the Torah. You know that's the greatest thing in the world. You're ready to take it. And Hashem says, yes, just one last thing. If you don't take it, I'm going to drop the mountain on your head, and we'll never hear about the Jewish people again. Now that's one scary thing in and of itself. However, the problem is like this. The claim to fame of the Jewish people at Har Sinai is the following. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that all the nations of the world were going to be very upset when the Jewish people received the Torah, because it makes the marriage contract, it's like a marriage contract between us and Hashem that is going to be eternally upheld by both sides. Hashem, who is the chassan, he's the groom, he is going to uphold everything it says in the Torah. He's going to give us all the rewards that it says. There'll be punishments as well if we don't behave. And the Jewish people were like the KLAL, we are like the bride. We are going under the chuppah, and we are getting ourselves prepared for the greatest union that a human being can have, and that is Har Sinai. That is the union of Hashem and the Jewish people, and the Torah is what is binding us together. So Hashem said, listen, the nations are going to come and they're going to complain to me. And they're going to say, it's not fair. You didn't give us the Torah. You didn't give us a chance. If you would have given us a chance, for sure we would have accepted the Torah on ourselves. You and those Jews, you just like those Jews. You took them out of Egypt, you split the sea for them, you made bread fall down from the sky, you brought water with this bitter, and you put bitter wood inside it and suddenly it becomes sweet. You like those Jews, you don't like us. Give us the chance, Hashem. We'll show you that we'll take the Torah as well. So Hashem says, fine, is that true? I'll offer you the Torah. So he comes to the great nation of Esav, and he says, Esav, I'd like to offer you a chance, an offer that you cannot refuse, the chance of a lifetime. It's called the Torah. Would you like it? And Esav says, just one question. What does it say inside of the Torah? So Hashem said, oh, you know what it says, Esav? It says, Lo yisirtzach, you're not allowed to kill. Now, Esav is from the greatest killers of all time. And Esav says, Lo yisirtzach, you can't kill. You know what? I'm sorry, we can't keep the Torah. If that's what it says, we can't keep it. Go give it to somebody else. He comes to Yishmael and he says, Yishmael, I'd like to offer you the Torah. Really, me? Wow. One question, Hashem, what does it say inside? It says, you're not allowed to steal. Not allowed to steal. That's like the basis of our nation over here. I'm a para adam, I'm a wild man. That's what I do all day long. Sorry, the Torah is not for us. And Hashem went to all of the Shivim Umos Ha'olam, the 70 nations of the world, and he offered every single one the Torah. And everyone asked the same foolish question. Ma ksiv be. What does it say inside of there? And to each nation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who knew the weakness of that particular people, he chose the one mitzvah or the one avera, the one sin that he knew would be difficult. He told them, no, it says that in the Torah. And they said, oh, it's too much for us, we can't take it. He comes to KLAL YISROEL, number 71 in the lineup over here of nations that are being offered the Torah. And he says, precious Jewish children, I'd like to make you an offer that you can't refuse. Would you like the Torah? And KLAL YISROEL immediately exclaims, Naaseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. We will take it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's coming from you. You don't ask any questions. A billionaire wants to give you a few $1 million. Well, I just want to know taxes and this. You don't ask. He's going to give you the check, drop it into your account. Do with it what you want. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us Torah. We take it right away. We don't ask any questions. And therefore they said, Nasa, we will take it. We will do. V'nishma, we'll learn it and we'll figure it out afterwards, Hashem. If it's coming from you, we have no doubt it's the best thing in the world. Asks Tosfos on the Gemara over there, and the Maral, who we're going to see tonight, is bothered. When the Jewish people came to the Tachti Sahar, to the foot of the mountain, they had already said those words of Naaseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. They had already accepted the Torah upon themselves emphatically, and they said, no doubt in our mind, if you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, offer it to us, there's nothing more that we want in the world. And the Gemara tells us that there was a bas kol, a heavenly voice that rang out, and it said, Migilo Razeh, who revealed the secret to my children, the secret of the angels. Angels, don't ask any questions. Angels, malachim, the angels that HaKadosh Baruch Hu designed to do His will. When Hashem says, go here, they go there. They don't ask a single question. When God says, do this, they do that. They don't ask a single question. Because they know if it's the command and the directive of God, it must be the best thing that they were created to do. Says the Gemara, who taught the Jewish people the secret of the malachim and the angels, that as soon as HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks, you just follow and you do what He says. So this is the greatest statement that the Jewish people have ever made before. They said, Naaseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear, and we are ready to accept upon ourselves everything that says in the Torah. Asks Tosfos and the Maral, so then why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu hanging the mountain over our heads and threatening us to receive it? We already said we want the Torah, Hashem. We're ready to accept it upon ourselves. We'll take it all. We'll figure it out afterwards. We know it's the best thing in the world. Hashem said, oh, really? Okay, let me just hang the mountain over and threaten you to death. And if you don't take it, I'm going to drop the mountain. What do you mean if we don't take it? We already said we're going to take it. So therefore, asked our Meforshim, our commentators, what was the purpose of the scare tactics over here of making sure that the Jewish people would accept the Torah upon themselves when they already said that they would take it? And they said it with such a statement that it's above and beyond even Malachim, the angels, what they said. So this is the difficulty that the sages have trying to understand what is the purpose of hanging the mountain over our heads, scaring us into taking it when we already said we will take it. If a person, just imagine a person asks you for a ride and you say, sure, no problem, I'll take you. Where do you have to go? They say, I just have to go down the street about a couple of miles. You can drop me off at home? Sure, no problem. Come, let's go to my car. And as you get to the car and you sit down in your driver's seat and the passenger gets in over there, he grabs your arm and he starts twisting it with all of his might. And he says, you promise me you're going to take me to my house? I just told you I'll take you. I'm in the car already. The car started. Leave. You promise? I told you I'm going to take you. What's HaKadosh Baruch Hu doing over here? He's twisting our arms to what? Till we scream, uncle. What is he twisting our arms for over here? We already said yes. So the Maral says the most fantastic idea. which is something that we need to think about as we go through this parsha, Parshas Yisro, and we begin to recognize that the fate of KLAL Yisro was changed forever because we stood by Har Sinai and we received the Torah upon ourselves. What were we accepting? So the Maharal asked the question, as I'm asking you over here, that is, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu hang the mountain over their head if they already said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do when we were here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we understand there's nothing better in the world. So he writes the following words, Aval ha'ikra perush hashanira pashut. The simplest explanation that I can offer you, says the Maharal, which I believe is clear to understand. Ki kafa le'amar ki gigis loimar. He hung the mountain over their heads to say, if you don't accept the Torah in your life, then over there where you are standing right now, you are going to be buried. Loimar, what does that mean? Says the Maharal, the Torah is a necessity that the Jewish people must accept while they were standing there by Har Sinai. And if they would not accept the Torah, then right over there at the mountain, I'll drop it on your heads, and that will be the end of the Jewish people. Well, you still didn't answer our question. Okay, so we need the Torah. It's necessity. We already said Na'aseh v'nishma we will do. So what is the fact that now we know, we have to keep it? Okay, therefore we're going to accept it. We already accepted it. The Yadua says the Maharal, it's known. Whatever is a necessity in a person's life, it is something that is b'mayla yoser, it is that much more valuable to them. Because it is impossible to exist without those things. Nobody could exist without it. For example, there is something called steak. A human being, believe it or not, they could live without steak. Especially 36, 48, 56 ounces of steak, you can live without, no problem. You will not suffer in this world if you don't eat steak. But there's something called water. And the human body, which is comprised of 80% water, will not be able to exist without water. Steak costs hundreds of dollars. Water, you turn on the tap and you drink it, it's all free. You can't live without the water. A little bit of sustenance, maybe some bread, maybe spread some peanut butter on there, maybe eat some apples, some almonds, whatever you need. A little bit of sustenance you cannot live without. But cake, ice cream, sushi, pizza, all those things, not a necessity. A person can go a whole life without ever tasting one of those morsels of food, they'll be just fine. But basic sustenance, can't live without. There's something in the air called oxygen. It's free, Baruch Hashem, because we use a lot of it. And a person cannot live without a breath of life, and therefore Hashem has pumped oxygen into this world in order that we should be able to survive and to live and to thrive every single day. So that is something that is it's impossible for a person to exist without those things, and therefore they are valuable. Ask anybody who went to the hospital for coronavirus and made it out alive. They will tell you how valuable life and oxygen is. How about the man who went to the hospital and he was having trouble breathing, and they hooked him up into the tubes, into the oxygen tanks, and he was paying thousands of dollars. He didn't even realize that thousands of dollars a day to get all of the care that he needed. At the end of his stay there, he gets a bill for something like $10,000 worth of oxygen. And the man said to himself, all of my life I've been taking breaths of air for free. I never realized how valuable one breath of life one little carbon of oxygen could be in my life. Says the Maharal, whatever is a necessity, you cannot live without. And it's so valuable, it's so precious, it becomes the most valued commodity that we have in our lives. What does that have to do with Torah? Lekach, therefore, kafa aleim ahar kigigis, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has hung the mountain over our heads like a barrel. La'idiya mailas haTorah, to teach us and inform us the loftiness, the value of Torah. She'efsha mibilado KLAL, it is impossible to exist without the Torah at all. Didn't the Jewish people know this? They said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. They must have realized how valuable the Torah is. Says the Maharal, no, it's not true. They didn't learn it until the mountain was hung over their head. Why? Because if Hashem would not have hung the mountain over our heads, then the Jewish people would have said the following statement. The Torah is not something that is eternal. That is a necessity that you must have constantly every single day of your life. It's not a necessity for all generations of the Jewish people. No. Rather, now while we're standing at Har Sinai, when we said Na'aseh v'nishma, we did it b'ratzon, with a will, with a desire, with a yearning for the Torah. And v'im loi kiblu la'hayitzrichin, and had we never accepted the Torah in our lives, we wouldn't need it. We would have maybe lost out on some pleasure. We would have lost out on a deeper bond that we could have with Hashem. But if we didn't accept it, so then we could claim that we never needed it. And the Maharal explains even further on this. And that is that had the Jewish people only come to Har Sinai, and had they said the words, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear, which means that they accepted the Torah emphatically with a great desire, a burning inspiration in order to accept it, they would have said the following words. You know what? When we accepted the Torah at Har Sinai, it was a very, very good time for the Jewish people. We just come out of Mitzrayim. We left our enemies behind. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was lifting us up from the world of impurity, and He was bringing us one level higher each and every single day. We get to Har Sinai, and there's this magnificent episode in our lives. There's the shofar blowing, there's thunder, there's lightning, there's smoke on the mountain. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is talking to us. We hear His voice. Of course, what person in the right mind would not have taken the Torah at that moment? But see, the issue is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, let's go about 500, 600, 700 years after Torah is given to us. We're standing in the first Beis HaMikdash, the first temple, and Bavel, the Babylonians, come in and they start driving us crazy, and they say, you know what, you dirty Jews, we're going to get rid of you. You and your Torah, we're going to send you into the Golus, into the exile. Who needs you? So you know what we would have come and said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Listen, not so good to be a Jew anymore. It's anti-Semitism, you know, a lot of things going on. We don't really want it. We didn't think it was going to be so hard to be a Jew. Hashem, take the Torah back. The Jewish people would end up in Spain. And they went from being the greatest of citizens, rich and powerful and famous, prestigious. They had it all, whatever you could imagine. And one day, King Ferdinand and Isabella, they turn on the Jews like that. And the anti-Semitism is racing in the world, inquisitions, Spanish boots, pain and suffering, burning at the stake. And the Jewish people come along and they say, listen, Hashem, you know, it's not like it was in the old days when we were coming out of Mitzrayim, when everybody was afraid of us and nobody would touch us, and you loved us so much and we got the Torah, Har Sinai. It's like a new world over here. This is the modern world. We're not so interested anymore. It's not so good to be a Jew. So you know what? Take the Torah back. The Jews are standing in Auschwitz, and they can smell the smoke. They can smell the stench of dead bodies burning every single day. Step out of line, you get beaten and clobbered. You watched your mother and your father and your children all die in front of you. As you come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you say, you know what, Hashem? Once upon a time, it was good to be a Jew. Torah was exciting, meant a lot to us. We were willing to say Nasiv and Nishma. But listen, when we accepted the Torah, we did it out of the goodness of our heart. We did it willingly because we felt that it was a nice thing to do at the time. Who would have taken it then? But we got to be honest with you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please forgive us, but take the Torah back. It's not for us. This is what it means to be a Jew? Stand in Auschwitz? Watch your whole family get killed? Is that what it means? So you know what? Take the Torah, Hashem. Says the Maharal, you know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was teaching us when he hung the mountain over our head? He was telling us that the Torah is oxygen. The Torah is water. The Torah is sustenance. And just like every single Jew that was in Auschwitz was starving for food, they were starving for nourishment. They were digging through the trash day and night to try to find one little extra crumb that could have been there. Because they know they can't live without food. Can't live without water. Dehydrate. You could pass out. You could die. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling them, even more than the food and the sustenance and the oxygen that is oxygenating this air that we live in, there's something that your neshama and your mind and your heart and your body and your soul needs and craves and cannot live without. And that is called Torah. And therefore, while you are standing here in Har Sinai and you are accepting the Torah upon yourselves with such a warm heart and so much yearning and passion and desire, that's not enough, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not enough. Because one day it's going to get tough to be a Jew. One day you're going to run into a brick wall over there and you'll say, well, this is what Torah is all about? This is what it means to be a Jew? I have no idea this is what we're accepting at Har Sinai. And you're going to try to return it to me. No, you're not. Because I'm hanging the mountain over your head right now and I'm forcing you to recognize that if you don't accept the Torah eternally in your lives forever and ever and ever, Shama tehek v'raschem, there will be your burial. And that's why the sages say over here, it shouldn't say in the words, Shama, over there will be your burial. They're standing on Har Sinai. It should say, Po, here, tehek v'raschem will be your burial. If you don't accept the Torah right now upon yourselves, that it's hechrechis, that it's a necessity, then I'm going to drop the mountain on your head. Over here should be your burial. Why does it say over there? Where's there? The answer is there is that time in history when KLAL YISRO will say, to be a Jew, this is what it means, this is what Torah is all about. Forget HaKadosh Baruch Hu, take it back. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if I wouldn't give it to you that you recognize the necessity, that over there in the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, or in the Inquisition, or in the Crusades, or in the pogroms, or in the Holocaust, when you say we don't want your Torah anymore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shama tehek v'raschem, over there will be the burial of the Jewish people. Because the Jewish people without the Torah is like a body without the soul. YISROEL bli Torah, the Jewish people without Torah, is kiguf bli neshama, is like a body without the soul. And as the body itself cannot survive without water, without oxygen, without sustenance, so to KLAL YISRO, the Jewish people, cannot exist a single day without imbibing the oxygenation of Torah in their lives, without drinking thirstily in the clean, clear waters of the Torah, without getting the spiritual nourishment that every single aspect of one's neshama, of their soul, requires in order to be able to use itself in the best way possible in this world. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm proud of you that you said Nasiv and Nishma. It means the world to me that you are so desirous to accept Torah in your life. It is amazing to see a nation that only 50 days ago were slaves in Egypt, and today they're willing to become servants to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with no questions asked. But I fear what the future of the Jewish people is going to look like, says Hashem. And maybe one time down the road, you're going to say, too hard, too many mitzvahs, not for us. We thought it was better to be a Jew. Who came up with all these laws anyway? At that moment, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you decide to bail on Yiddishkeit and the Torah, Shama Tehei Kfaraschem, over there is going to be your burial. You can't live anymore. You are like a body without a soul. You're like noses, nostrils that cannot breathe in any oxygen. You are like a body without any water, any hydration. And therefore, I'm hanging the mountain over your heads, because I want you to realize that for all generations that you ever go through, with all the challenges, tribulations, the Jewish people, as we know, we have not had a very easy history. There has never been a nation in the history of the world that has gone through as much turmoil as we have. Not a single one, and they're still around to talk about it. The reason that we are still around to talk about it is because Hashem hung the mountain over our heads. And therefore we agreed. We made, it's like almost like a handshake. We agreed with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no matter what's going to happen, no matter what the world is going to do to us, no matter how much the enemies will hate us and torture us and make our lives miserable, it doesn't matter, like we're going to say in the Haggadah in just a couple of months. Visham de Lavaseinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu always stood by us. But why? Because we stood by our pledge to Torah. We accepted it. We recognize it is necessity. We understand that we cannot live without it, just like a person cannot live without oxygen or water or basic nourishment. The Jew without the Torah is like the body without the soul. That's nothing. They are lying on the ground. There's nothing there. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want you to remember that. I want you to realize that. I want you to understand that every single day, and that means when it gets hard, when it gets difficult, someone who's in the ICU, they never realized how precious oxygen is, what they would do for one breath of life, one little spurt of oxygen that they could be able to breathe. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the more difficult it is in our history, you need even more connection and more life force and more air from the Torah. But if you don't, over there where you are, when you give it up, that's the burial of the Jewish people. If this is true, so the Maharal asks elsewhere, so then what's the whole Nasiv and Nishma story over here? Kodesh Baruch comes to every single nation. He makes this whole charade over here. He knows they're not going to accept it. He knows they're going to give them a halacha, a mitzvah, an avera that they can't uphold. He knows they're going to say no. Then he comes to KLAL Yisrael. Jews, would you like it? Yes, Nasiv and Ishmael, we want it. Very good, says Hashem, but not good enough. I have to hang the mountain over your head. I have to make sure that you understand that I'm going to kill you if you don't take it. You can't live without it. It's necessity. Why? Hashem doesn't waste anybody's time. Why go through the entire charade over here of the 70 nations, the one nation, KLAL Yisrael? We say Nasiv and Ishmael, we're like malachim, like angels, but it just ain't good enough. Why did Hashem make us get to that point of Nasiv and Ishmael? And says the Maharal, the reason is because Nasiv and Ishmael was the schus, it was the merit which the Jewish people had, which allowed HaKadosh Baruch Hu to hang the mountain over our heads to make us certain that Torah is something that we're never going to give up and we're never going to leave. That means when HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that we wanted Torah emphatically, we want it lovingly, with passion and with excitement and with inspiration, Hashem said this, that's how you're going to keep Torah. That's how you're going to learn. Now you will be able to handle the next thing I'm going to do to you. and that is, I hang the mountain over your head, I threaten you. And if you accept it under these circumstances for all generations, Torah is all yours. Had the Jewish people never said the words, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. Had they never shown HaKadosh Baruch Hu how excited they were to have Torah in their lives, had they never danced and sang by Har Sinai, showing HaKadosh Baruch Hu just how dear and how precious Torah was to them, he would not have wasted his time to hang the mountain over their head, because they would not have understood the point that he was making. But since then we said yes, Na'aseh v'nishma. We're so excited, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to keep your Torah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, it's not just the excitement of right now. It's going to be times when it's not going to be exciting. There will be times when it's hard to wake up in the morning and keep that Torah. There will be different periods of the history of KLAL YISRO that we will go through where it's going to be ugly, an ugly world. And the Jewish people are going to be beaten and tortured and pillaged and plundered. And it's not going to be so beautiful like standing at Har Sinai. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but this passion that you have to accept the Torah right now with such an elevated state, you have to hold on to it, because in every single generation, no matter what will take place and transpire, you must make sure that you keep it. And you are beholden to it. And you live it the way that you are supposed to, because that is Kiheim Chayenu. This is the life force of the Jewish people. Na'aseh v'nishma was a merit that we had that allowed for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to put the mountain over our heads and take us to the next level of acceptance. I was once sitting by my Rebbe's table, Rav Schwartz, on Shavuos many years ago in Eretz Yisrael, and he was speaking about these words of Chazal, the sages, and he said, I don't understand. It says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifted up the mountain over their heads, and he threatened them, if you accept it, great, blessings, all good things. If not, I'm going to drop the mountain on your head and kill you. If there's a mountain, for example, and there's people standing at the foot of the mountain, and you lift the mountain up, the mountain is not over the people. The mountain is up in the air, but the people are still on the circumference over there of the mountain. So how does it work out that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm lifting up the mountain, and if you don't accept the Torah, I'm going to drop it on your heads? They're on the side over here. The mountain is one place. They're on the sides. How can he drop the mountain on their heads? So Rabbi Schwartz said, so much so did the Jewish people want to accept the Torah upon themselves, that although they were standing by the foot of the mountain when Hashem lifted it up and he said, I'm hanging the mountain over your heads, the Jewish people walked under the mountain with faith and with courage and with fortitude and with conviction. And they said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whatever you say, whatever you want from us, however much you're going to give us the responsibility of the Torah, we will accept it in our lives, because we understand there is nothing that is greater than this. So even in the mountain being hung over our head, which was supposed to be frightening, and put in this message that it's a hechrechis, that it's necessity, even there, KLAL YISRO went beyond the letter of the law. They went beyond what they had to do, and they said, well, we'll walk under the mountain, Hashem, to make this work, so that you can impress upon us the necessity and the importance of Torah in our lives. This is Maimon Har Sinai. This is the great revelation which took place at Mount Sinai. And on this revelation, the Jewish people have survived for 3,500 years. A revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaking to one nation, all of them at once, that we could hear his voice. We could see the sounds and the wonders that were there. HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to us as he never spoke to another single nation. And the message was, This is a necessity, no less than water, no less than oxygen, no less than sustenance. This is your air of life. This is your hydration in a parched world. This is the nourishment in a world which leaves you hungry from all the other things that you are doing. And therefore, once that we accepted that upon ourselves, and we realized that, and we understood that, and we said, yes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no questions asked, that's how we're going to live our lives. That's why we find the Jewish people in the most amazing of situations, the most heart-wrenching, the most harrowing of experiences, no matter what is going on around them. They don't let go of the Torah, because without it, a person is simply not alive. Yisrael bli Torah, a Jew without the Torah is keguf, bli neshama, like a body without the soul. There is a fascinating story which took place, it would seem over here, I would imagine probably something about at least maybe 100 years ago. There was a beautiful couple living in Russia whose name was Rabbi Yoel and his wife was Devorah. They lived in a small little village in Russia. Yoel was learning most of the day and Devorah was tending to her acts of kindness and chesed that she did throughout the town. But there was one thing that was missing desperately from their lives, and that was a child. For 15 years, they waited and they prayed and they davened and they beseeched HaKadosh Baruch Hu, give us a child. And finally, after 15 years, Hashem gave them a precious little boy who they named Mordechai. And Mordechai, of course, was the apple of the eye of his father and his mother. They loved him to pieces. They were with him constantly. And when Rabbi Yoel would sit and he would be learning in his room, he would often take the little infant into his arms and he would sing the famous words in the Gemara, Omar Rava, Omar Abaye. And he would sing this beautiful, beautiful song of Torah, and Mordechai would sing and he would hum and he would dance and he would love his father's music. And one day, unfortunately, the unthinkable happened. The Tsar, the Russian, the wicked Tsar, he sent his soldiers into town and they had a terrible decree on the Jewish people. They would try to kidnap young Jewish children and they would enlist them into the Tsar's army. They would keep them there for 25 years, and after 25 years, they would release them. They didn't even know that they were a Jew anymore. The Tsar wanted to destroy our Judaism. Yoel was not in the house at the time, but his wife Devorah was playing with his son Mordechai, and suddenly there's a pounding on the door, and the door flies open, and then the army officers come in. And to the great shock of the mother, they rip this child out of her arms and they take him and they slam the door behind them. The mother is screaming, she's frantic, she's yelling, she's crying. But nobody hears her cries and nobody comes to her aid. And she just sprawls herself on the floor and she is sobbing uncontrollably. Sometime later, her husband, Rabbi Yoel, comes in and he sees his wife on the floor crying her eyes out and he says, my dear Devorah, what's the matter? And by the way, where is Mordechai? I don't see him. Where is he? And she tells him the tragic news of the Tsar's army, how they came in and the soldiers grabbed their son. And now Yoel gets down on the ground. He begins crying as well. Finally, he gathers himself together. And he goes down to the police station and he says, I'm sorry to bother you, but my son was kidnapped today. I'd like to know where he is. And the police said, you're asking us? We don't know anything. And Yoel kept pushing in different times in those first few months looking for clues, for hints to find out where his son was, to no avail. And one day as he was walking down the street, somebody from the KGB came his way and said, listen, stop searching for your son or you're going to get yourself into trouble. And so Yoel took that as a message. I have to stop. And he threw himself into his studies like never before. That was the only solace that he and his wife had. His wife was busy with her chasadim, her acts of kindness, helping other people. And Rabbi Yoel was busy learning the words of Torah. That was Lulei Sarascha Shashua. If it wouldn't be for that Torah is my plaything, is my delight. Azavadati ba'ayna, I would drown, I would be lost in my misery. So he learned and he learned and he learned. And every once in a while, when he would see maybe the coast was clear, he would go and press somebody, and you know where my son is. And many, many, many years passed. And they lived a life childless once again. And one day, of course, the door began banging again. And Yoel opened the door, and there was KGB and army officers there, and they said, the game is over. You are coming with us. He had pressed one too many times to try to find his son, and now they were going to get rid of him all once and for all. And they put him in a Russian prison, and then they shipped him off to Siberia. And he came to Siberia, of course, a freezing, frigid, cold place. Misery, those that checked in, they never checked out of there. It was almost impossible. And he knew that he was going there most likely to be killed. But he had one thing that he was able to bring with him, and they didn't take it away from him. He had one Gemara above a Basa, the longest Gemara in all of Shas. He had it with him. And he would sit in the dungeon, in the freezing cold of his prison. And he would sit and he would learn and he would imbibe the sweet oxygen and the waters of Torah in his life, the sustenance. And that's how he got himself through this miserable period in his life. Until one day, they came to his cell and they said, your time is up. The death sentence has been decreed on you. We're going to bring you out to shoot you dead. But the Tsar has a rule, and the rule is that you are allowed to ask for one last wish, anything that you want. Yoel was holding his Gemara Bava Basra in his hand, and he had a question on the Gemara that he knew that the Rashba, one of the famous Rishonim, earliest commentaries, speaks about. So he said to the guard, anything? They said, yes, anything that you want. He said, my last request is, I would like a Rashba on Bava Basra. And the soldier looks at him. A what? And as Yoel looks at this young soldier in the eyes, suddenly something about that soldier's face looks familiar to him. And he thinks to himself, no, it can't be. Is that my son? It can't be. And then he looks at the soldier and says, Mordchale, go bring Tati a Rashba. And the soldier looks at him with a cold face like, are you crazy? What are you talking about? And he thinks to himself, maybe in fact I am crazy. What is going on over here? But a rule is a rule. And so the soldier goes and he tells another soldier he wants a Rashba on Bava Basra. So they dispatch one of the soldiers out to the nearest Jewish village that they can find. And 2 or 3 days later, he returns with a Rashba in his hand and he hands it over to Rabbi Yoel. When he opens up the Rashba, he sees in there that they had torn out a page from the Siddur. And there was the page of Vidui, the confessional that a person says before they die. And he realized that whoever they came to in that small village must have realized that this was a Jew's last request, one rashba. So they put the vidu in there so he should be able to say those final words before he leaves the world. And then Rabbi Yo opens up the rashba and he begins devouring the words. He goes right to the place where he needs to. His question, what's bothering him? He sees the way the Rashba answers it, and suddenly after about maybe an hour of studying the words of the Rashba, he understands and he begins singing a song. And he's dancing there in the cell as he's about to get killed. And the soldiers are looking at this crazy Jew. Are you kidding? You're about to get killed and you're singing and dancing about a book. And then that soldier comes again. The one who reminded him of his son. And as they get closer, and he's bringing him to the wall where he's going to be shot, Rabbi Yoel turns to this young man and he says, Modchale. He said, I don't have much time left in this world. I'm not going to be here after a short amount of time. So please do whatever you can. Remember, you're a Yid, you're a Jew. And Mordechai looks at him with a stone-cold face. What are you talking about? And they take him and they put him against the wall. And the commanding officer who is going to pull the trigger comes over. And this young soldier is standing there watching. And Rabbi Yoel is saying the words of Vidu and he's crying. There are tears that are streaming down his cheeks. And suddenly he turns and he looks one last glance at that soldier. And he begins singing those famous words, Amar Rava, Amar Rav Huna. The same niggin, the same song that he sang when his little son was sitting on his lap. And the tears are coming down his cheeks and he's singing again and again, Amar Rava, Amar Rav Huna. And the order is given and the trigger is pulled. And as the trigger is pulled, we hear, Papa! Suddenly everything came back to this man, this young man over here from when he was a child, and he recalls that's his father. He heard the song. And he runs over and he holds his father in his hand and he says, Papa, I remember. And Mordechai held his father's hand tight in those last moments of his life as he saw the blood and the life leaving the face of his father. And his father only asked one promise. Don't forget that you're a Yid and live your life like a Jew. The next morning in the prison, Mordechai, the soldier, was missing in action. And he disappeared and he went to the town of Krakow. And he lived the rest of his life and he was known as Mordechai, the tzaddik of Krakow, the righteous man of Krakow. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm happy that you accept the Torah with enthusiasm. I'm happy that you're excited about it. But Torah is hechreiches, it's a necessity. It's oxygen, it's water, it's nourishment, it's everything all together. And even in the prison cells of the tundra of Siberia, when your final hours in this world are being numbered, don't forget about the Torah. Don't forget about the Rashba. And if a Jew will live in such a way, look at the impact that it had. His own son, 25 years later, after having every ounce of Judaism squeezed out of him, he heard the sweet words of Torah, Amar Rava, Amar Rav Huna. And like a flood of memories, all comes back. And the oxygen and the water and the sustenance of Torah ended up becoming the guiding light and force in the life of Mordechai the Tzaddik of Krakow. So as we read this week's Parsha, and we come to those famous words of KLAL YISRO standing betachtis ahar, by the foot of the mountain, remember, we weren't just by the foot of the mountain, we were tachas ahar, we were under the mountain. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to recognize and to realize just how great and how valuable the most precious gift in the world possibly could be for the Jewish people. That no matter where we will be, no matter where we will go, no matter what will be happening in our lives, individually, historically as a nation, one thing is clear. Yisrael bli Torah, a Jew without the Torah, is keguf bli neshama, is like a body without the soul. May we be zeicha im Yetza Hashem to imbibe the oxygen of Torah, to drink thirstily the sweet, clean waters of the Torah, to have the sustenance that we eat, we gobble up the delicious words and the mitzvahs, the life of the Torah. And in that way, just as we took it upon ourselves forever and ever and ever, and we recognize by our Sinai that it is a necessity, it's not an option. It is a necessity which every single one of us, our hearts, our souls, and our minds require to survive on the greatest level possible. May we be zeicha that just as Rashi writes, that every single day should be kechadashim beinecha, it should be fresh and new in your eyes. That newness and that freshness should be that we recognize that the Torah is necessity. It's oxygen, it's water, it is sustenance for the neshama, for the lay, for the heart, for the moyach, for our mind. And it is the greatest bond, and the greatest ava, the greatest love, and the greatest treasure that the Jewish people and HaKadosh Baruch Hu can share together forever and ever. Be'ezras Hashem. Have a wonderful night, everyone. We shall see you next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.